Salutations, one and all, and welcome to RWBY Revisited. In this month's entry, let's examine Huntsmen and Huntresses, and just how they're implemented, and their effect on the world building. Please be aware that spoilers for all volumes will follow, and any material revealed or explained in supplementary material will not be weighted as heavily as that seen in the show. So Huntsmen and Huntresses. Those brave souls that serve to protect humanity and the faunus from the grim. That's at least what their MO reads on the tin anyway, and in general, that seems to be the case. But let's go deeper than what we see on the surface. Let's get this first matter out of the way. Where is everyone? No, really, where are all of the Huntsmen and Huntresses? For their role in Remnant to be so hyped up, why don't we see more of them? With 4 major academies training them, why haven't we seen more? Now I get that combat is a part of their job, and obviously some would die that way, but not enough for their presence to be virtually non-existent. We do know that after Lionheart switched sides, he set up many of Mistral's huntsmen to be killed by Tyrion and Hazel, but surely not all of them died to their hands.
Execute Order 66.
Yes, my lord.
But, to be fair, the main cast weren't in much of a position to see much of Mistral while they were there, so I can let that slide. What isn't so acceptable is the events in Atlas. Atlas Academy is right there, and yet we hardly see any huntsmen. There are the Aesops, yeah, and Winter, but that's almost it. There are Robin and the Happy Huntresses, but that's where it ends. We see brief moments of Team Funky, but they're still students. They have an oddly disproportionately large fan base for being characters that we saw for only a few minutes collectively in Season 3. Never really understood that one.
What's that?
One would think that with Ironwood recalling all of his forces into defensive positions around Atlas, that we'd have seen dozens of them fighting Grim and Mantle, and even more once Monstro starts its assault. Can you imagine seeing all sorts of unique semblances, weapons, and fighting styles all being used to fight the endless hordes of Grim? There should have been huntsmen with direct combat abilities, some to augment and support others, and even some with utility semblances. But just going off the show, you'd think that the Aesops were all that Ironwood had at his disposal. I get that this was probably an issue with animation more so than anything else, as designing unique characters and abilities would eat up resources, but that's not a valid excuse for world building. Given that the graduates of Atlas Academy are heavily encouraged to join the military, there should be many huntsmen and huntresses comprising the officer corps of their forces. Squads positioned on the front lines would likely be led by a huntsman. But that's enough of that. You get it, you aren't dumb. We should have seen far more huntsmen than we do in the show. But what about how they fit into the world? We know that there are 4 major cities, one for each kingdom in Vale, Mistral, Atlas, and Vacuo, but there are also smaller towns and settlements well away from each of these major population centers. The 4 major cities, at least as far as we can tell, have all sorts of means of keeping themselves secure. However, this isn't the case for these other towns. Huntsmen should be practically everywhere around these places, as they would be the town's source of protection from Grim and other threats. Think about it. If you're a small town out a ways from the kingdom's major city, the odds are already against you. Grim are an obvious threat, but there are bandits as well, like Raven and her tribe. You could obviously pick up a weapon and fight yourself, but why not pay a huntsman to do it for you? They're trained specifically for combat and come complete with an aura to shield them, a semblance to further augment their abilities, and powerful weapons to make short work of any attacker. One huntsman alone would likely be worth more than several scared and disorganized militia members. They'd be worth every cent to keep your town safe. Huntsmen could probably ask for just about any price to protect these places, and pretty much get it. It makes me wonder why Ren and Nora's village didn't have one on their payroll. Things might have gone down very differently if they had, but this could further solidify huntsmen as being part of the upper echelon in society. It's kind of like how a knight or a samurai was more a noble status than the common people. Being a huntsman means that you keep people safe, and as such, you might be able to upsell yourself for more money and status. Elite huntsmen could then have more powerful weapons, giant fancy houses, eat only the finest meals, and have their desired choice of company fawning over them. There could be a clear visual distinction between the new upstarts, mid-level huntsmen, and the uber-successful few. Some might even take on a youth that they could train, and in turn, that kid would maintain their equipment and keep track of menial, mundane tasks that the huntsman doesn't want to deal with, like a page or a squire. So all this could lead to the successful and well-known huntsmen being treated like celebrities, like how we have music artists and actors. Can you imagine those deranged types of people following a successful huntsman or huntress around, getting pictures and videos of them all the time? I imagine that would get pretty annoying after a while, but it's not all sunshine and unicorns. Huntsmen, with the exception of those in the Atlas military, are not employed by the government or any other agency. They're freelance. In essence, they're mercenaries whose services can be bought by the highest bidder. This means that they need to live paycheck to paycheck and job to job. They don't get paid every 2 weeks like the rest of us. This has its own drawbacks. You'll have to compete with other huntsmen to get clients, proving that you are the best of the best. After all, who's going to hire a second-rate huntsman for something important enough to call upon an elite warrior? Reputation would be key. This could lead to infighting amongst huntsmen, though. Imagine if you're a huntsman or huntress who's made a name for yourself and have just scored a job with a client who's going to fork over some serious cash for you to get rid of some Grimm or bandits. But en route, you're ambushed by some upstarts who can't get any work because you're around. They might try to set a trap for you, looking to kill you so that they can take on the job instead. Then you've not only got to worry about the initial threat, but these enemies as well. This would probably lead to the creation of something like a guild hall that you'd see in a lot of fantasy media, or at the very least, a site where potential clients could post their job offers. This could potentially help solve the former issue, making it so that others wouldn't know who's gotten certain jobs, or the fine details of those jobs. But being freelance also puts you at the potential mercy of your clients. If you perform the task that they hired you for, what's to stop them from just not paying up? I had a teacher who worked freelance web design, and he had no shortage of horror stories of clients trying to weasel out of paying him after he'd done the job.
Well, Lucky, I'll tell you what. Since the information you gave me was worth nothing, that's what I'll pay you.
As a huntsman, you'd have great job security with no shortage of Grimm and ruffians, but you'd have no guarantee of the people hiring you not paying what you've earned. Even government regulations likely wouldn't do much, as you'd really just be being paid under the table.
If I were a wealthy man, I wouldn't have to work hard.
You're also paying for everything out of pocket. Transportation, ammo, dust, food, supplies, all of it is paid for by you, meaning that doing any job will also involve dipping into your savings. A government organization would be supplied by them, but being freelance, you only have yourself.
In terms of money, we have no money.
Then there are the sorts of jobs that they could undertake. Grimm are a natural threat in most parts of Remnant, it would seem, so they'd likely be the bog standard sort of missions, though they could vary greatly depending on the type of Grimm encountered. However, bandits might be a bit more problematic. There would likely be many of them, and they would probably have more strategy than Grimm, and access to weapons, making their jobs more dangerous and likely costing more to complete. But we should also think about the ramifications of Huntsmen and something that only they and those like them possess: semblances. Some characters have remarkably powerful abilities, which could potentially be used for nefarious purposes if left unchecked. Take illusionists like Neo, Emerald, and even Blake for example. If someone can create illusions, they could set up a scenario that could make someone perceive that they're under attack, and try to defend themselves, only to in reality attack an innocent person unprovoked. How, if you were the person who is being set up, would you prove your innocence? There would be witnesses everywhere who saw you act out with no provocation, and there's virtually no evidence that you could present to make your case. They could commit theft or even greater crimes without detection. They could coerce civilians without aura to do things for them under threat of violence. Honestly, I'm surprised that the various governments of Remnant haven't tried to come up with a registry of what each huntsman and student can do with their semblances just to keep tabs on them for this exact possibility. I'm almost never for governments being that controlling, but with potential superpowers in play, I might make an exception. Just this once. But I can also imagine the governments enlisting their services as well. Atlas has the right idea with utilizing their skills in the armed forces, but various utility semblances could also prove valuable. Take Robin, for example. She could realistically have made a killing working in the legal system, with her semblance providing undisputable evidence of someone telling the truth or a lie. Her presence in court would make trials a breeze. Just have her use it on the suspect, ask them whether they committed the crime and any details about it, and boom. You'll find out that they're either guilty or innocent, and you save everyone time and money while making the chances of a wrongful conviction almost nil. I can also imagine that the governments of the Four Kingdoms would want to keep tabs on the number of huntsmen and huntresses of each of the other kingdoms, and also who the notable ones are. It's unlikely, but a large number of strong huntsmen could allow one nation to expand their territory. I mean, we already know, albeit vaguely, of a war between the kingdoms, consisting of Vale and Vacuo versus Atlas and Mistral. It's how the whole color naming rule came into being. If the kingdoms fought before, they could again, in theory. Lastly, the competency of the huntsmen we've seen has been all over the place. Certain individuals are portrayed as being elites. Whether or not they live up to that standard is debatable, while others are complete chumps. Just look at the two doofuses on the Argus Limited. They failed spectacularly at fighting off the Grimm. One immediately died, and the other should have had his arm ripped off after it hit the tunnel wall. How did goons like them graduate? But enough about that. The academies will get their own video in due course. But I want to hear what you think. What are your thoughts on Huntsmen and Huntresses and how they're handled in the show? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and leave a like if you're so inclined. I would like to thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to see more. And may you all have a weapon in each hand.